pornography is always a function of technology. It's always a function of technology. It's not art. It's an adjunct of technology. And what you saw over this period of time was the beginning, let's say the camera in the mid 19th century in France, the daguerreotype, immediately being used as a vehicle for pornography. Same thing with the motion picture film. And the good thing about this was that it released art as the vehicle for pornography. So, I mean, the title of the book is The Dangers of Beauty, the Conflict Between Mimesis and Concupiscence in the Fine Arts. And the picture I'm going to use, I think, is Titian's Venus and the Organ Player, if you're familiar with this picture, because basically the organ player he's got one hand on the keyboard of the organ, which is the whole notion of logos and celestial harmony. But he's turning around, there's Venus naked lying back, and he's looking right at her crotch. This was the problem with mimesis at this point in Italian art. You got so realistic, you could succumb to your passions. Well, the camera eliminated all that. Once you got the camera, but unfortunately, the camera also eliminated mimesis. And you had French Impressionism as an example, and that culminated in Picasso. You can argue something about French Impressionism, but by the time it got to Picasso, it's weaponized and it's an attack on everything that Western art stands for. So it's more technology, not art.
And now with the smartphone and the ready availability of high definition video in the pocket at all times, that technological potential has been unleashed in an unprecedented way.
Absolutely. At no point in the history of the universe have we had this type of problem, simply because of technology. So if you go back to Pompeii, there are pornographic frescoes in Pompeii, but they're on the walls of whorehouses. And, it's maybe it's state-of-the-art mimesis at that point, but it's not all that accurate. And so the potential for arousing the passions is diminished as a result. Now it's, especially every kid having one of these phones, every kid having access to pornography. This is a crime against humanity, and someone should be held responsible for it, accountable for it.
Marquis de Sade said he thought that sexual liberation would ultimately lead to violence, and that was the connection between the women in the theaters and the revolutionary uprising. If you look at the research on porn, even if people think they're just starting off with mild stuff, it progresses to more and more violent forms, that the brain becomes pulled in, addicted, and you need more of a stimulus each time. So before long, people find themselves looking at things that initially they would have found abhorrent.
Right.
Now, what do you think explains that logic? Why does it progress in that way? Why does sexual revolution, liberation lead to violence inexorably?
He described that. He's described the trajectory. He knew it pretty well. The natural passions, it's in the 120 days of Sodom. And the final is, it goes to violence and then murder. Why does liberation or destruction of sexual morality lead to murder? That's a good question. St. James said the same thing. Paul said the wages of sin is death. It leads to death in the soul, okay, which is what mortal sin is. You're kind of spiritually dead. And then that leads to a greater and a greater attraction to death in and of itself, because you're drawn there. Plato would say that, the disordered soul needs disordered music. Well, the soul in death needs death as a kind of titillation to keep the passions going. That's obvious. The trajectory of pornography is the same thing. This came out in the 1990s when Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin, two feminists, said that pornography was violence against women. Well, they were right.